Let me just start off by saying that the speed limit is not a suggestion. There's no question mark at the end of the speed limit sign. Nobody's tiny little mushroom chode is getting wet because you're going twice the speed limit. Your life isn't a movie. You're just a boring normie like the rest of us. Slow down, please. I know I sound like an old man, but entering my 30s, I definitely realized that a lot of these smaller issues definitely get under my skin way more easily, considering I just didn't care about life when I was in my 20s. But anyways, all jokes aside, today we're actually going to be talking about something pretty serious, and that is the Venom Sonyverse film franchise. We're mostly going to be talking about the new film, but also whether this particular franchise as a whole is headed for a very ugly, abrupt ending. Now, I'm not sure exactly what the plan for Sony was at the very beginning, but having this title be The Last Dance, that only makes us believe that this is the end of the trilogy for Venom. Now, does that necessarily mean that this is the end for Venom? Or is this a kind of like a introduction to like the Sony franchise finally coming together? We already know that Craven is supposed to be released sometime later in December of this year. And then we have gotten some speculation that there are other films that are set to be released by Sony. The only thing that I can think of is that there were some minor little edits towards the end because of how badly Madam Web did. So there could be the potential that maybe they even changed the title of the film. I'm not 100% sure, but that's what it seems like to me. Like maybe they're finally deciding to end the Sony universe or maybe reboot it somehow. Now, the franchise as a whole has been somewhat marginally successful. For example, the first Venom film was able to gross about a little over 800 million at the box office worldwide. Most of that came from overseas or other countries. Here in the US, it actually did not do too well, but overall 800 million for a film like the original Venom was actually pretty successful. The sequel, Let There Be Carnage, which honestly was a much lesser entry into the trilogy, only made about 500 million, and that makes perfect sense to me. I know I am definitely in the minority here, but I genuinely enjoyed the original Venom film. I thought it was a change of pace, something different. I was a little bit tired of the monotonous formula that Disney had created for their Marvel films. And as I said, it was poorly written, not great plot line. It was all over the place, but it was something fresh, something new, and I had definitely had to commend them for that. And even though the film wasn't perfect, I still kind of enjoyed it. It was just a fun little side showcase of what Sony was capable of doing with some of the Marvel products or some of their Marvel franchises. Now, the second one, I'm not really going to get too deep into it, but I really did not like it. I hated it. I thought Woody Harrelson was poorly cast here. Didn't make a lot of sense as Carnage, but overall, even the action was very lackluster in my personal opinion. But if all we had to talk about were those two box office results, that wouldn't really be that bad for Sony. They're making money, not Marvel Disney type of money, but it's still making very, very solid profit. However, we do have to talk about Madam Web, which only made a little over 100 million at the box office, and then Morbius, which almost doubled that, but it was about 180 million. And I'll be brutally honest with you guys, I'm not ashamed to admit out in public or over the internet, I guess, that I actually kind of enjoyed Morbius. It was an okay film, but the people have spoken and Sony is in a lot of trouble. And I think the Venom film, just as with the Deadpool Wolverine film, I think they're under an insane amount of pressure to actually be successful. And I have to reiterate, I'm not just bashing Marvel projects, even though recently I have been talking about, Marvels and Madam Web and Morbius and Venom 2, but there have been other flops from other really big franchises. We had the Transformers film not do so well. Indiana Jones, which is a true staple of cinema and has been now for 30 years. People are just not attending movie theaters as much as they were back in the day, and I think all of these big giant summer blockbusters are perfect examples of that. There are also a ton of rumors surrounding the new Craven film. There is some speculation that they continue to postpone the release of this film, and I personally believe that there are multiple different reasons. Just this year, the fact that they decided to move the film back all the way to December, that's just a prime example of them not wanting any competition. They did realize that there were a lot of really big summer blockbusters that were supposed to be released or are being released as we speak. For example, you had the new Planet of the Apes installment. You had the Furiosa spinoff, Dune 2, so on and so forth. There are a lot of really big movies that commanded a lot of respect at the box office, and I feel like them moving it back is just another prime example of them being really afraid of this entire situation, especially considering it sounds like they've actually spent a decent amount of money on this film. But I can almost assure you that that's not the only reason. I do believe that potentially they had to reshoot or edit some stuff as a lot of the films were flopping, whether it was Morbius and Madam Web. I think potentially they could be destroying or dismantling this particular universe just for the sake of them not continuing to invest money into these projects that are just not bringing back enough profit. It's just really frustrating from a big giant comic book fan like myself, and I think a lot of big comic book fans across the world are definitely very anxious to see how this entire situation unravels. And honestly, after viewing the Venom 3 trailer, there's definitely one singular tear dropping from my eye socket, and only one, because if you have an illustrious mustache, you're not allowed more than one tear, especially if it's just a movie. But I have to say, I'm very disappointed. The movie continues to be, or at least this entire series and trilogy continues to just be over the top cheesiness. There's a little opening and a little kind of monologue that Venom goes on with Tom Hardy, and it's just cringe. You can't look at the screen with a straight face. A couple of other things happen. I mean, there's like a venomized horse in there. It looks like they're going to introduce Toxin, which is an offspring of Venom. So there's a lot of really cool stuff happening. Like I said, it's kind of like a cool nod to the comic book community, people that actually read the comics, but at the same time, it's also really disappointing to see the route that they're taking. It's the same formula, it's the same boring nonsense that they've been doing since Venom 1. Not to say that we expected anything better, but just something a little bit different. I will say there is potential for the future if they are able to land this. It sounds like the entire planet of Venom is about to land, and there's a really big potential that the symbiote king himself is introduced. For those people that have read comic books, Null was just recently created as like the symbiote king or the god, and that's another really interesting talking point for really big fans. This could be a villain that is introduced into the Sonyverse and kind of brings everything together full circle, but only time will tell if that's exactly where they're going. Personally, I think Tom Hardy's a great actor. I just don't think that this role fit him. And honestly, I know, again, I'm in the minority, but I would love to see a Spider-Man in this universe. I'm not a big Tom Holland guy, but I would love to see them integrate maybe a new Spider-Man in here somewhere. But at the end of the day, it's pretty plain and simple. There's no direction. There's no cohesiveness going on here. Sony is absolutely bleeding money at this point, and if they're not successful with their upcoming couple of Sony Marvel films, this could potentially spell the end for this entire Sonyverse. The only thing that I will commend Sony for, at least at this particular point in their entire franchise or their universe, is that they're actually trying to establish the world. They're trying to potentially establish the entire universe revolving around Spider-Man and then integrate them in somehow. I'm not sure how they would do that, if they would bring Tom Holland over or just bring in a brand new actor to portray Spider-Man, but I genuinely feel like they're trying to put forth the effort. I know none of it has really been too successful or marginally successful at best, but at least, like I said, the foundation is laid and they could potentially continue to build on that. But as always, this is just my personal take, my personal opinion. I may just be making too much out of nothing. Very curious to see what you guys have to say in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Stay safe out there. Don't drive too fast. There are no such things as respawns in real life. And I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you.